Sean Diddy Combs, Cian Combs, Diddy, I asked. Diddy.
Let's get some girls.
I told you not to trust those guys. Puffy killed Tupac, man.
Maybe I said that about Puffy because he killed Tupac.
Do you think people really know you for real?
No, people don't really know me for real.
So who is this person, Sean Combs, that we still don't know?
You'll have to find out. You need to come along for the ride. You have to watch this movie until the end, baby. Believe me, I have an action-packed ending waiting for you.
With me, I drop $1 million on your head. Race you and your whole family.
In 1996, a brutal crime shocked the world. The murder of rapper Tupac Shakur, ordered by Sean Diddy Combs for the head of the rapper. The mogul promised to hand over $1 million to a gangster named Keith D, as he himself has confessed several times. Wish? Today, 30 years later, Keith D was finally brought to trial. But how can a man who confesses to such a brutal crime only be judged after so much time? What will happen now to the dirtiest mogul in the music industry? And most importantly, why did Diddy order Tupac to be killed? To understand this, we need to go back to 1793. At that time, the famous rivalry between the East Coast and the West Coast was something relatively new and was taken just as friendly competition among the rappers. But all this atmosphere of friendly competition was about to turn into a war with many deaths. And all of this was thanks to a guy named Sean, the owner of Death Row Records from the West Coast. In '93, Suge was the final boss of hip-hop. He had just turned the industry upside down. After his label released the classics The Chronic by Dr. Dre in 1992 and Doggy Style by Snoop Dogg in 1993. If all that success wasn't enough, the guy was one of the most feared moguls in the industry. Known as the Devil in the Red Suit, he was connected to the Bloods gang and had a reputation for getting everything he wanted through violence, brutality, and threats. In other words, in 1993, Suge Knight had the entire industry in the palm of his hand and even put the West Coast at the top of the rap game. Happy. Meanwhile, on the other side of the country, Sean Diddy Combs, who was then known as Puff Daddy, was just a small fish in the business, with his newly founded label Bad Boy Records still taking its first steps. And just like what happened with Tupac, the relationship between Suge Knight and Puff Daddy started as a professional friendship before turning into a deadly feud. To give you an idea, Puff was so broke at that time that when he left New York to perform in Los Angeles, he couldn't afford to pay for security. So he relied on the free protection offered by Suge Knight himself. But all of that changed in 1994 when the rapper Notorious B.I.G released his album Ready to Die with hits like Juicy,
It was all a dream. I used to read Word Up magazine.
and Big Papa.
Throw your hands in the air if you's a true player.
The album put Bad Boy Records, Diddy's label, and therefore the entire East Coast, back on top of hip-hop, surpassing everything, all. Really, from that point on, Zugo no longer saw him as an apprentice, but as competition. To make things worse, Diddy started charging money for Big to perform at events promoted by Death Row. Because of this, Suge felt disrespected, since he had helped Puffy for free back in the beginning. It was in this atmosphere that Suge Knight began to plan retaliation. The creation of Death Row East, a branch of his label in New York, to try to steal potential R&B and hip-hop talents, before Puffy could take them to Bad Boy. But even before carrying out this plan, the perfect opportunity arose for Suge. And it came through a tragedy. On November 30, 1994, the rapper Tupac Shakur, one of the most promising names in West Coast rap, was ambushed and shot in a studio in New York. We've already explained the reason and the minds behind this incident in the video of Decided. I'm taking out Hit 'Em Up, which I'll leave here in the description, but for now, just remember the name of the main orchestrator of the ambush, Jimi Hendrix. He'll be very important later on. The fact is that even though Tupac survived this attack, he started to suspect that his, until then, friends, the notorious Biggie Smalls and Puff Daddy, were behind it all, since both of them were in the studio building and acted strange when they saw the rapper covered in blood. To make things worse, Tupac was falsely accused of rape and was arrested soon after. He also attributed this to a betrayal by friends he met in New York. He became paranoid, furious with everyone from that city. It was in this scenario that Suge Knight saw the perfect opportunity for his record label. Me, a happy Questa Oeste, extremely talented and promising, who hated Puff Daddy and was out for blood, ready to destroy Notorious B.I.G.'s legacy. The recipe for chaos was ready. Suge just needed to light the match, and that's exactly what he did. On August 3rd, 1995, during an awards ceremony at the Source Awards in New York, he took the stage and fired off the words that would start the deadliest war in hip-hop.
If you want to be an artist and keep being the star without worrying about any producer trying to show up in every music video, in every song, dancing, come to death row.
At the time, Diddy produced his artists' music videos, but he always made sure to show up dancing in the videos to promote himself. That's why everyone got the hint, including Diddy himself, who soon went on stage to try to calm things down.
I'm the producer they were talking about here, but contrary to what you might think, I'm very proud of Dr. Dre, Death Row, and Suge Knight for their achievements. And all this East Coast and West Coast war has to stop.
But it was already too late. From then on, things went silent in a brutal way. On September 23, 1995, the producer Jermaine Dupri threw a birthday party at the Platinum House Club in Atlanta. Unaware of the beef between Suge Knight and Diddy, Jermaine invited both of them and they ended up meeting at his party. Suge was accompanied by several members of the Bloods gang, and Diddy had brought with him dozens of security guards from the Crips gang. Diddy started an argument and things quickly got out of control. The argument turned into a fight, and during the brawl, one of Diddy's security guards, named Anthony Wolf Jones, ended up shooting one of Suge Knight's best friends, Jake Rubbles, a respected member of the Bloods gang. Even though he was rescued right away, Jake Rubbles ended up dying at the hospital shortly after. Diddy even tried to calm the situation down, telling Suge that he had no control over what happened to his friend and that he felt really sorry about the shooting. But the apology didn't help much. Title. From that point on, what was just an industry rivalry turned into a full-blown gang war in the meantime. Still in prison, Tupac heard rumors that it was people close to Notorious B.I.G. who shot him. And to make things worse, B.I.G. even released a song called Who Shot Ya?, which Tupac immediately took as a dig from B.I.G., mocking what had just happened to him. The release of Who Shot Ya? Made Tupac go from just being suspicious to hating B.I.G. and Puff Daddy with all his might. And this was the perfect moment for Suge Knight to finally execute his plan of mass destruction. On October 12, 1995, Suge Knight visited the prison where Tupac was being held and offered to pay the $1.4 million bail to free the rapper. In exchange, Tupac would have to sign a contract with Death Row Records, in which he would be required to produce at least 3 albums for the label. Knowing that Suge Knight had the same arch-enemies as he did, Tupac didn't think twice and signed the contract. Tupac got out of jail, went straight to the Death Row studio, and the first song he recorded there already contained serious attacks and death threats to Notorious B.I.G. and Puff Daddy, ambitions as a writer. By the way, we've already broken down this classic over there. Very important person area of the channel. If you want access to this and many other exclusive videos, just click the join button. But out of all the tracks Tupac recorded in that studio, the heaviest one was, without a doubt, the famous diss track Hit 'Em Up, which dropped like a nuclear bomb in the hip-hop world. Was involved, it was pretty clear that the next time Bad Boy and Death Row crossed paths, someone would end up dead. Diddy knew this very well and realized that it would be way too dangerous to travel to Los Angeles. But avoiding the West Coast wasn't a viable option. Not performing shows there meant throwing money away, and money was everything on Diddy's mind. The big obstacle was Suge Knight's army, which always had at least 50 to 100 members of the Bloods gang. Diddy understood that the only way to protect himself was by relying on the massive support of the rival gang, the Crips. It was at that moment that he got in touch with an old friend named Dwayne Davis, better known as Keith D, one of the richest and most respected gangsters of the Southside Crips in Los Angeles. The reason we know this today is because Keith D himself told this whole story in his book Compton Street Legends, released in 2019, and that, in fact, served as evidence for the police to arrest him in 2023. In the book, Keith D says that he met Diddy in the early 90s when Diddy hadn't even created Bad Boy Records yet. Over time, Keith D and Diddy became so close that Keith even lent his '64 Chevrolet Impala to Diddy to shoot a Usher music video in 1994-19. According to Keith D, he met with Diddy several times when Biggie was on tour in California. During one of these meetings, which happened at the Green Blast Deli restaurant in West Hollywood. In June 1996, Keith D was with a friend named Eric Von Zip, a powerful drug dealer from New York, who was also a friend of P. Diddy. According to Keith D, it was at this dinner that Diddy offered them the sum of $1 million for the head of each of the targets, Suge Knight and Tupac Shakur. As Keith D himself detailed in his book, Puff waved at me and said, "I need to talk to you, big dog." We went over to his side. Puff was terrified and continued, "I have some problems I need to solve." The big boss, referring to SHUG and PAC. I looked him in the eyes and replied, "That's not a problem. Can we make this happen?" Just a month later, a new fight broke out at the Lakewood Mall in California. One of Death Row's security guards and a member of the Bloods gang named Trevin Lane was there and ran into several members of the Southside Crips. After an argument, they started fighting, and during the confrontation, they managed to steal the Death Row gold medallion. From the security guard, Trevon Lane recognized the face of one of the Crips as Orlando Anderson, the nephew of Keith D. From there, things got even worse. We arrive at September 7, 1996. On that day, Tupac and Suge Knight went to the Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer Hotel in Las Vegas to watch the fight between Mike Tyson and Bruce Seldon. Noticing the opportunity, Keith D, his partners from the Southside Crips, and Eric Von Zip went together after the fight. Already at the exit of the Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer Grand Hotel, Trevin Lane recognized Orlando Anderson as one of the guys who attacked him at the mall and went to tell the Death Row crew. That's when Tupac, along with Suge Knight, went straight at Orlando Anderson and beat him up in front of the cameras. And in front of everyone. World. After the fight, Tupac went to the Luxor Hotel, where he was staying. And he told his fiancée, Kidada Jones, about the beating he had just given Orlando, bragging and comparing himself to Mike Tyson in the ring. Soon after, Tupac changed clothes, left his girlfriend at the hotel, and went out with Suge Knight toward Club 662, where he would perform at a charity show. In his book, Keith D did, he details what happened right after. Zip saw the opportunity and called me. In his car, he had a secret compartment. He opened it, took out a black Glock .40, turned to me and said, "It's time to get the money." Keith D then got into the white Cadillac, which was rented and driven by his friend Terrence Brown. And in the back seat, Orlando Anderson and DeAndre Smith got in. All four were members of the Crips gang and went out hunting for Tupac. For three of them, that hunt meant revenge for what happened to Orlando. But for Keith D, it was the opportunity to earn $1 million. Around 11:15 at night, they pulled the Cadillac up next to the black BMW where Suge Knight was driving, and Tupac was in the passenger seat. Without an angle to shoot, Keith D hands the gun to DeAndre Smith, who gets scared to fire, and gives the gun to Orlando Anderson, who fires 13 times at the BMW. Suge Knight was only grazed, but Tupac was hit 4 times, one of the bullets piercing his right lung. And after 6 days fighting for his life in the hospital, Tupac Shakur, at 25 years old, passed away. After Tupac's death, Keith D and Eric Von Zip understood that they were entitled to at least half of the agreed payment, since one of the targets had been eliminated. But that's not exactly how things happened next, as Keith D himself explained on the VLAD TV podcast.
You never got paid?
Never.
Nothing?
Not even a single pair of sockets, you understand?
It's crazy, but that's what Puffy always does.
It seems like whenever something bad happens, he acts like there's crap on the grass. He dodges it and gets away from the mess.
According to Keith D, he met with Zippa several times afterward, asking if Diddy had already made the payment, and Zippa always said no. From then on, Zippy started avoiding Keith D, who began to suspect his friend's behavior. But this is where things get even weirder. In a 2021 interview, Gene Deal, former bodyguard of P. Diddy, revealed that he once saw Zippy with a $1 million check in his pocket.
Zip had a check in his right back pocket. It was a $1 million check. He said that Jimmy Henchman gave it to him. The check was signed by someone named Barry Hankerson or something like that. I think it was Barry Hankerson, his uncle, a manager or something like that, who gave him the check for Blackground Records. That's what he said.
Blackground Records is a record label founded in 1993 by singer Lia's uncle Barry Hankerson, with the goal of launching his niece's music career. Barry Hankerson was close to Diddy, and the label's artistic director was none other than Jimmy Henchman, the man who ordered the ambush against Tupac in 1994, in which the rapper was shot before being arrested. See how things start to connect? Interestingly, Blackground Records signed a major distribution deal with Atlantic Records in 1996, the same year Tupac died. And usually when a record label signs a deal like this, it's normal for major investors to sell their shares in the company. In other words, Diddy conspired with Jimmy Henchman and Barry Hankerson to give Zippy a percentage of Blackground Records worth $1 million. That way, they were laundering the money that was dirty with Tupac's blood. In 1999, in a song with the singer BlackRock, Diddy even mocked the situation, saying,
Fuck with me, I'll drop $1 million on your head.
Mess with me, and I'll put $1 million on your head. I'll wipe you and your whole family out. In the following years, Keith D tried by all means to get in touch with Diddy, but the mogul was already at an unreachable level in the music industry, and Zippy completely disappeared from the radar. Until in 2008, Keith D was arrested for drug trafficking, and the story finally took a turn. At the time, the Los Angeles police were still investigating the death of Notorious Big, which had happened just a year after Tupac's death. Also under very suspicious circumstances like Keith D, he supposedly had no involvement in Big's death, but he knew people who might have. The Los Angeles police offered him a special deal called a proffer agreement. In this agreement, Keith D would have complete immunity for 1 day, during which he would be interrogated and could say everything he knew. He could inform on others and even himself without facing any negative consequences. In exchange, he could be released from prison. Outraged at being betrayed by Zippy, Keith D didn't think twice about abandoning the street code, and he revealed to the FBI all the details involving D and Tupac's death, which indirectly are connected to Big's death. Despite the full confession, the police couldn't find enough physical evidence to conclude the investigation. And just the word of a criminal wasn't enough to make solving the case even harder. As the years went by, fate silenced almost everyone involved in that fateful night, leaving only one man to tell the story. Orlando Anderson was killed in '98 during a gang shootout in Compton. Deandra Smith passed away in 2004 due to health problems, although there are rumors of poisoning. The driver of the Cadillac, Terrence Brown, was murdered in 2015 in a case that still hasn't been solved. Even Eric Von Zippa passed away from cancer in September 2012. In 2014, Keith D was diagnosed with colon cancer. Believing he was facing a death sentence and needing quick money for treatment, he decided to break his silence to profit from his story. That's when Keith D started appearing on various podcasts and television shows, where he spoke openly about his involvement with Diddy and Tupac's death, culminating in the release of his book, Compton Street Legends, in 2019. Given his public statements, his immunity agreement, made back in 2008, completely lost its validity. And that led to his arrest in September of 2023, almost 30 years after the crime.
We are here to announce the arrest of Dwayne Keith Davis, known as Keith D, for the murder of Tupac Shakur.
In court, Keith D's defense uses a strategy claiming that he is a compulsive liar. His lawyer argues that Keith D lied during the proffered agreement, and that all the confessions in books and podcasts were made just for entertainment and to make money, which, unfortunately, is a very solid defense. Since, after so much time, there are no more weapons, cars, or physical evidence of anything Keith D has talked about to this day. Meanwhile, what the world wants to know most is if the most disgusting mogul in the music industry, industry. Sean Diddy Combs will finally pay for the death of one of the greatest icons in hip-hop history. The truth is that Tupac was dragged into a war he didn't start and didn't understand. Anyone who knows the rapper's story knows that he was very different from what he became after signing with Death Row. If before he sang about fighting poverty, political awareness, and motherly love, later he became a man. A consequent, irresponsible, paranoid, and uncontrollable. But, contrary to what many think, this change didn't happen in Hit 'Em Up, but in another song, which he wrote while still in prison and was the first one he recorded after being released. Ambitions as a writer. You can check out this playlist of stories involving Diddy and the whole war between Tupac and Big, which I think you'll really enjoy too. Cool. Thank you so much for your company, and I'll see you in the next video. You